Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have a brand new deck tech for you from the new set Phyrexia All Will Be One. And just a quick heads up, this is not a budget deck tech, so there are going to be some expensive cards in there, although I think it shouldn't be too hard to find substitutions for those expensive cards. But before we do that, just a quick reminder to please click subscribe if you enjoy these videos. It's the only way the YouTube algorithm really notices me, and we're currently growing the channel, and it helps me a lot. Much appreciated. And today we have a brand new deck tech for you. We have the new Ovika Enigma Goliath. For 5 colorless, 1 blue and 1 red, it's a 6/6 legendary creature Phyrexia Nightmare with flying, ward 3 and pay 3 life, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create X/1/1 red Phyrexian Goblin creature tokens, where X is the mana value of that spell. They gain haste until end of turn. As soon as this was spoiled, I knew that I needed to make a deck list around it. One of my favorite cards is Shock Typhoon, and I've been wanting to put it into a deck lately, and this seemed to fit perfectly, and that got me thinking, could I put as many cards as possible that triggered on non-creature spells rather than instants or sorceries? Most of the decks I've seen built around this are Spellslinger decks, but I feel that's been done to death in Izzet. So what I wanted to try to do was create a spell deck that was actually more themed around all sorts of spells, not just instants and sorceries, but artifacts and enchantments as well, since Ovika has a unique advantage of triggering with all of those types. I think the deck ended up turning out pretty good, so without further ado, let's get started. And first up we have Bothersome Quasid. Now this is in there because obviously it triggers on all non-creature spells. 90% of our deck is non-creature spells since there's only 9 creatures in the entire deck, so that is going to trigger a lot. So this is going to trigger a lot, and it's going to stop our opponents from blocking our tokens as well, which is quite nice. Curiosity Crafter is going to be fantastic with the hasty tokens that Ovika is giving us, seeing as we're going to draw a card whenever any of them connects with our opponents. That's really good. Next up is Flux Channeler, which might seem a little bit odd, but we have a little bit of a counters sub-theme in the deck, so this is going to come in handy, and also it's going to trigger with basically every card in the deck. Next up we have Junk Winder, which is here for 2 reasons. It has affinity for tokens, which is obviously going to be great because we're making about 1 million tokens in this deck, and then whenever a token enters the battlefield under our control, we can tap a non-land permanent from our opponents, and it won't untap during the next untap step. So we can basically keep tapping down whatever our opponents play, since we're making so many goblin tokens. Manaform Hellkite is basically a cheaper version of Ovika, not quite as good of course, because it's going to give us only 1 body instead of many, but still it's nice to have an alternative in case she gets removed. Mercurial Spelldancer is going to work really nicely in the deck because it's going to trigger on each non-creature spell. We also have Proliferate to get even more counters on there, and then when it connects with an opponent, we're going to be able to double one of our instants and sorceries, so that's very nice. Serum Sovereign's going to get an oil counter every time we play a non-creature spell, which again is most of the deck, and after that, any blue mana we sing into this is going to be a free Serum Visions, which is really awesome. Serum Core Chimera is a card I really like in this deck. It's a variation of the typical Spells Matters Izzet card that we get in almost every set, but this one's a little bit better because we can actually just keep drawing cards with this. You don't have to discard and deal the damage, although it is great to have that option to remove creatures. If you want to, you can just keep removing 3 counters from this and drawing a card each time, and since we have so many non-creature spells and some Proliferate, it's going to be pretty easy to draw a bunch of cards off this. Even if it draws you just 2 cards, that's definitely worth it. Finally, we have Third Path Iconoclast. It's basically going to be similar to Ovika, except only 1 token instead of many, but still coming down on turn 2 can be really good because we can play this and then play a bunch of mana rocks, and it's going to make a few nice little tokens. Next up, we're going to move on to our sorceries. We have Aminato's Augury over here, which is obviously going to be awesome. We have a pretty wide spread of spell types in this deck, so having a really expensive spell that's going to make 8 goblins and might hit us 4 to 5 cards is really, really good. Blasphemous Act is just a staple board wipe. Inspiring Refrain I really like with Ovika because we can actually suspend it early for really cheap, and then we can play it for free, and it's going to keep casting repeatedly as long as it doesn't get countered, which means that every few turns we're just suddenly going to get 6 goblins out of nowhere. That's pretty solid. The same thing applies with Reality Strobe. It's overcosted bounce, but the fact that we can keep doing it repeatedly is going to allow us to get a nice little bit of value from this. Rousing Refrain similarly is going to give us a big burst of mana every 3 turns, and it's also going to add 5 goblins if we have Ovika out. Seagate Restoration is going to be fantastic in this deck as a big expensive spell that can draw us a ton of cards. Shatter Skull Smashing is going to be pretty good in this deck since we're making a lot of mana. Song Mad Treachery is just another spell that counts as a land, so it's pretty nice. Surge to Victory I really like as a finisher because we can cast it, and then since Ovika happens on cast, we're going to get 6 goblins immediately. Then this can exile an instant or sorcery and immediately put it under those goblins. So when they deal combat damage, we get to cast that many copies. That's insane even if we have nothing else on the board. Sister's Gambit's going to be a nice way to draw cards for fairly cheap and proliferate. Treasure Cruise works really well in the deck because it's going to cost very cheap thanks to Delve and still going to give us 8 goblins. And then we're moving on to instants. We have an offer you can't refuse, just a nice way to protect our board. Big Score can give us 4 goblins, 2 treasures, and draw us 2 cards. That's pretty great. Chaos Warp is just staple removal. Comet Storm is a nice way to finish off the game, and we have a bunch of mana late. Counterspell is going to allow us to interact with our opponents on the stack. Cyclonic Rift is a great finisher. If you don't have this, you might consider running Perplexing Test. That's pretty good too. Delayed Blast Fireball is a fantastic card because it's so easy to foretell it and then play it at instant speed. Dig Through Time is similarly good to Treasure Cruise. We can basically just delve away a bunch of cards and play for super cheap. Experimental Augury is going to allow us to dig 3 cards deep and proliferate, which is really solid. Fuel for the Cause is a slightly overcosted counterspell, but coming with the proliferate effect on it makes it pretty decent. And Keep Watch is bound to be amazing in this deck with all the creatures we have. If you attack with a bunch of goblins and then play this, you're just going to draw so many cards. Slandy Vision is just another card that we've put into deck to have more non-creature spells. It should hit most of the time because we have 25 instants and sorceries, so the odds are pretty good. Unexpected Windfall is basically the same card as Big Score, and Valakut Awakening is another great way to refill our hand. Astral Cornucopia is Gramp that's going to grow in this deck, and since we have quite a bit of proliferate, this should happen quite a lot. Contagion Clasp is going to allow us to proliferate, and it's also going to deal with one of our opponent's creatures. Contagion Engine can allow us to proliferate twice, which is going to be great. The Candler of Endless Water gives us no maximum hand size, which is something we're actually quite interested in this deck with all the card draw we have. Eldrazi Monument is going to make 5 goblins immediately if you have Ovika out, and then those goblins are all indestructible and have flying. So good luck to your opponent dealing with them, because everything you cast is going to give you more fodder to sacrifice to this. Everflowing Chalice is another card that should go in every proliferate deck. Glittering Stockpile is going to be pretty good in this deck because those counters are going to get proliferated quite quickly, and that can give us a turn where we get a ton of mana to cast our big finishes. Heraldic Banner is going to be really good to give all of our tokens +1 attack and basically still count as a mana rock. Phyrexian Altar is a great way to turn those goblins into resources by sacrificing them and adding a mana. Replicating Ring is going to generate a ton of mana with all the proliferate we've got in this deck. Skull Clamp is one of the best ways to draw cards in Commander, and we're going to have no shortage of creatures to sacrifice in this deck. Staff of Completion is a mana rock that's also going to double as a proliferate effect and as a card draw engine, so it does a lot of things in this deck. Strixhaven Stadium is one of the ways we can win the game because we should be connecting with a lot of goblins fairly easily, and as long as this has just 1 counter on it, we can proliferate, and then all we need is 1 more connection to win the game. And Throne of the Godfarer is another good finisher because we're going to have so many tap tokens. This is going to deal a bunch of damage, and it does it to each opponent, which is crucial. Next on, we have our enchantments. Goblin Bombardment is obviously great when we're making so many tokens. We can just keep them there until we need to sacrifice them. Impact Tremors is also going to work fantastically with all the goblin tokens we're making. Inexorable Tide is a 5 mana enchantment, which means we're getting 5 tokens, but it's also going to let us proliferate for anything we play after, which is going to make it very easy to finish the game. Kindred Discovery is an absolute house in this deck. Every single time we make a goblin token or attack with one, we're drawing a card. That's basically all our deck is doing. One with the Multiverse is absolutely sweet because it's going to let us cast stuff for free but still get the full value from Ovika. It's also going to basically guarantee that we never run out of gas after we play. Outpost Siege is almost always going to be used for the second mode as a finisher, but it still can be used as a card draw engine in a pinch. Reconnaissance Mission is a great way to draw cards, and we can actually cycle it away if for whatever reason we're digging for something. Shared Animosity is another decent finisher. It's going to make all of our goblins absolutely massive without the downside of something like Coat of Arms. Shock Typhoon is going to fit perfectly in this deck. We're going to get a bunch of extra tokens whenever we play anything, so it's a nice alternative to Ovika in case she gets removed. Sunbird's Invocation is a super spicy one that I've really enjoyed. This card is super fun, and we're playing so many big expensive spells that it's very easy for us to cascade into something else. And finally, we have Planeswalkers. We have Jaya, Fiery Negotiator, which is going to be great in this deck. She's super cheap to pick up as well. You're going to get monks with prowess, which are all going to grow big when we play anything. She's also going to give you card advantage if you need to, which is nice. And then the -2 isn't even irrelevant either because you're going to have so many attacking creatures that you can actually use it as removal. So it's basically creature generation, card draw, and removal all in one card. That's pretty sweet. Sahili Sublime Artificer is going to give us a 1/1 token every time we cast a non-creature spell, so it should be pretty easy to protect our planeswalkers with her out. And finally, for lands, we have Mystic Sanctuary to return an instant or sorcery from our graveyard to our hand. We have Reliquary Tower, which is going to give us no maximum hand size. We have Khan's Bastion in case we need to proliferate a little bit more. We have War Room to draw some nice cards. And we have Scavenger Grounds to deal with our opponent's graveyard. So there you have it. That has been our Ovika Enigma Enigma Goliath deck tech. What do you think? Are there any things you would change? Any additions that you think I missed? Please let me know in the comment section below. I read all comments and respond to all of them too. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next time, take care. Woo!